silliest deaths in history. This is bound to be interesting.
The silliest deaths in history.
Oh Lord, we're here.
Sometimes it's your own pride that can get the best of you. This is Hans Steininger, and this is his beard. Hey, my eyes are up here. Looking like the wisest wizard in the world, Hans was a public spectacle.
Good Lord. So long that it split. Motherfucker, that needs leggings. Look at that thing. God, it's longer than him. And then he's got the fucking buzz cut. Like, is it one or the other? Is that how beards work? Does it just come from up here and then you just gotta, like, pull it and then it just kinda, like... Is that a stick? What? I'm so confused. There's so much happening in this photo. And then that feather is just... Good Lord, back in the day, everybody just looked a little pretty. Jeez.
The 16th century, and also a well-respected
This section is called Fear the Beard. That's
politician. Cause, I mean, come on, who are you gonna vote for? Majestic and marvelous beard boy Hans, or the lame and lackluster clean-shaven Franz? Und that is how I will be lowering taxes while simultaneously providing affordable healthcare and housing.
Sorry, but... You know, men with beards, man, they just look wise. They look like they know a lot. Except for some people. Like the guy that's, you know, sitting on the corner, you know. He's just kinda... He looks like he's seen some stuff. But might just be what he's snorting. Either that or, you know, just some people's cars are just, they just look freaking weird. Like, tell me why I saw, like, the Duckmobile. Like, why is there a huge duck on top of your car, bro? Like, who made that?
For all. Alright, but where's your beard? I don't have one.
Can't be a man without a beard.
This guy stinks!
But behind that big bushel of bristles beats a kind heart, one that legitimately cared for his town and its people. So much so that Hans was elected as mayor for 6 consecutive terms for the town of Braunau am Inn, a town that resides on the border between modern-day Austria and Germany. It's also the birthplace of another famous facial hair haver, albeit far less loved by history, but that's another story. Measuring in at over 4.5 feet in length, Hans's big-ass beard was his defining feature, and was certainly a testament to his patience and care in many aspects in his life. If you can brush your beard, you can untangle legislative issues. If you can oil up your whiskers, you can lubricate the political machine. So it goes without saying that cosmetology and political science are of equal value. At least from a college degree standpoint. However, Hans's biggest asset would be his downfall, quite literally. On September 28, 1567, a fire broke out in the town, which was a much bigger threat back then than it is today. Since the extent of firefighting tactics were just pathetic pails of water, a single small fire could reduce your whole town to cinders real quick.
Not to mention
Hans, who usually tucked his beloved beard into a leather pouch for safekeeping and uninhibited travel, let his lusciously long locks whimsically whip in the wind as he ran to help with the fire. Scuttling down some stairs in a panic, Hans had accidentally slammed a piggy right on his own facial pubes, causing him to slip and trip down the entire staircase.
Oh my good Lord,
He snapped his neck,
life.
and the town was devastated. Not by the fire, but by the loss of their beloved mayor. Before being buried, the townsfolk had Hans's beard gently removed and chemically preserved, immortalizing his legacy. The forever facial hair is still on display in a museum in the town today. You know his ghost is pissed, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Gotta be.
Vital Farms farmers give their hens a lot of attention. Is it really necessary to give them that much?
Nope.
You see, look at that beard.
Vital
That's manly
Farms.
me up.
Good eggs, no shortcuts.
Gotta be.
These are the Nuance Audio glasses, and they're not just stylish, they actually help you hear better as well.
What? 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 Okay, I'm so lost. As a glasses wearer myself, and also someone with tinnitus, that made zero sense. Like, I beg your finest pardon? What do they connect to? Are they Bluetooth? Do you have, like, a Bluetooth chip inside your eardrum? Because that's very, very odd. Sunday Drive? Oh, what? The Simpsons Hit and Run. That's unfortunate. That's an unfortunate name. Yes, I'm sure you have a good beard, too.
Ever have an extreme case of the sleepy ha-has where you find anything and everything to be complete comedic gold to the point of not being able to even breathe?
No.
Now try to imagine this soggy scoop of Cheerios doing that. This is Chrysippus, a rather influential Greek Stoic philosopher in the 3rd century.
What, Christ a pissed? What, is Jesus upset? Is that what they say when that happens? Good lord. He looks like a wife beater. Ugh. Ugh. Good lord.
BC. In case you don't peruse that corner of
Yes, I
YouTube,
know.
Stoicism is the philosophy that you only ever need to focus on what you can control in your life. Anything reasonably outside of that control, Hakunas Matatis, not my problemas. Which is a pretty solid philosophy, especially
know.
in this age
I
of
know
doom
it's
and
you.
gloom social media designed to make you perpetually paranoid and pissed off. Chrysippus was also a huge proponent of logical reasoning,
that nipple
having
thing.
created an original system of propositional logic, stuff like if, then, and or statements that we use to describe the world around us today. For example, if you are not subscribed to this channel, then you're dead to me. Simple logic. The basic idea is that any and all things happen for a reason. Well, I'm sure Chrysippus would have a hard time understanding the logic and reasoning surrounding his rather untimely death. According to legend, Chrysippus, at the fermented old age of 73, got trashed at a feast. In his slizzard state, he had stumbled upon a donkey who was munching on some figs. Registering at least a 6.9 on the ancient Greek comedy scale, the masticating mule was a hilarious sight to behold, prompting Chrysippus to exclaim, quote, "Now give the donkey some pure wine to wash down the figs." This added punchline sent the Lord of Logic over the edge. Chrysippus reportedly hurled himself into a fit of laughter so intense that he had collapsed, foaming at the mouth. Despite some nearby partygoers attempting to help him, he had knocked himself dead with his own joke. But the question is, can you actually die from laughter?
Could never.
Sure you can. It's rare,
could
but
never.
medically possible. If you laugh your ass off to the point of it being an uncontrollable fit, that actually puts a lot of stress on your heart. So if you have a
Yeah.
weak heart, you're probably going to exacerbate some underlying conditions, leading to a heart attack. You also have the possibility of losing consciousness if you laugh yourself out of breath for long enough. But you have to hear or see something exceptionally funny for that to happen, so don't worry. You're safe here. Now, of course, this recount of events is debated by historians. The guy who documented this particular death was ancient Greek biographer Diogenes Laertius, who lived a few hundred years after Chrysippus' death, so he was far from an eyewitness. Diogenes nuts! On top of that, he also wrote an alternative, more mundane account of the comical death, simply writing that Chrysippus died of alcohol poisoning after drinking too much undiluted wine. But I guess he needed to spice some things up for his readers. If there was ever proof that the universe has a cruel sense of humor, then it's the curious case of American lawyer and politician Clement Vallandigham. Howdy. Though he resided in the Union state of Ohio during the mid-1800s, Clement was adamantly against the Civil War, calling it, quote, a wicked, cruel, and unnecessary war. Which is fine, but being a member of the Copperhead faction of the anti-war Democrats, Clement was a very vocal Confederate sympathizer, speaking out against President Lincoln and the abolition of slavery, to which Lincoln was all,
That's why.
and sent him to the South.
That's why he said it's unnecessary, because it's gonna take away something he wants. That's why. Yeah. I guess that makes sense, but I thought Ohio was on the Confederate side. Am I slow? Maybe. There were very good possibility of that. But like then again, Why am I completely forgetting where Ohio is? My dad is even from there, and I cannot remember. Just, like, it's off the map. It's completely gone. Just poof. It doesn't exist anymore.
To live amongst his Confederate companions in 1863. Clement, who was clearly not about that life, snuck aboard a ship and shipped himself off to Canada before sneaking back to his home state of Ohio to perform rather inconsequential political mumbo-jumbo for the next few years. But after the war was over, Clement attempted to run on political platforms while still advocating for slavery. However, he suddenly switched his views with the Democratic New Departure policy of 1865, which basically 180'd the Democratic Party's stance on slavery once they realized that it fell out of favor in the public's eye. So, being branded as a no-good slavery supporter for life meant the figurative death of his political career. Instead, he turned to a career in law, which would soon lead to his literal death.
That's a big switch, buddy. What the flip? Don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like I'm the problem. Look at you, bruh. Like, ugh. Could never.
On June 17, 1871, Vallandigham met his demise while defending his client, Thomas McGeehan, a young fella accused of shooting and killing one Tommy Myers. Clement claimed that Myers had, in fact, not been murdered, but accidentally shot himself with his own gun while getting up to stand. Clement vowed that he could demonstrate this before the court, proving McGeehan's innocence. And so he did.
Are you kidding
Now,
me?
when reenacting a scene that results in someone accidentally blowing a hole through their own tummy, you want to make sure that you have safety measures in place that would physically prevent you from doing the same thing. Clement didn't do that. Instead, he had mistakenly used a loaded pistol.
Oh, great
While
heavens.
demonstrating the scene as Myers, Clement attempted to draw the seemingly harmless firearm from his coat pocket as he stood up. And he blew a hole through his own tummy, just like Myers. Clement Vallandigham died just 12 hours later from his injuries. The verdict? Not guilty. McGeehan was acquitted and was a free man.
Oh, freak yeah.
Until he was murdered a few years later, that is.
Oh no.
This isn't just any chat,
That was a
it's
change.
ClickUp chat. Sure, you can tag your team, ask questions, and even drop an emoji. But the real magic is
Okay.
You can tempt death all you like, but eventually, he's gonna get what's his.
Yeah.
That's what big old Bobby Leach found out in 1926. Born in itty-bitty Britain, England in 1858, Leach grew up to be quite the daredevil. Unfortunately, most of Bobby's early life is lost to time, completely shrouded in mystery. We do know that around the 1880s, he had left boring old England for a more exhilarating life in the States. Apparently an excellent swimmer, Leach eventually landed a gig as a professional high diver with the greatest show on earth, the Barnum and Bailey Circus. There, he performed daringly dangerous feats in front of thousands of eager onlookers. This had quenched the adrenaline-thirsty void in his life for a while, but eventually he retired from the circus.
I don't know why I was expecting, like, the Looney Tunes, where they just disappear. But of course he just falls like a Family Guy character, just... like, what the flip? Good lord. This picture looks very uncomfortable, and I don't know how to feel about it. I feel offended. I don't know why, but I do. I also don't like how that tag is sticking out, like, I don't know why. It's the smallest shit that will irritate me. Makes no sense. And then, of course, he's an old man. He's got bad knees, but, like, why are you a professional high diver, then, if you got bad knees? Don't you need your knees? Yeah, for some other reasons.
Life at the age of 50 in order to extend his life expectancy a bit. But that logic was tossed aside rather quickly, as in the early 1900s, Bobby decided to settle down as a humble businessman at Niagara Falls. Oh, I mean, that's a proper woeful, isn't it? Initially content with just opening up a restaurant, Leach noticed the ever-increasing tourists flocking from afar to see a bunch of water spill over a cliff. So, this gave him an idea.
Oh.
The daredevil was back. Between 1906 and 1911, Leach performed various stunts around the falls, including parachuting from the nearby Honeymoon Bridge to the river below. Over the years, Leach continued to push the envelope, coming up with more and more dangerous stunts to draw larger and larger crowds. Eventually, he faced his biggest challenge, the falls themselves. And on July 25th, 1911, entombed in a customized giant metal barrel, Leach took the plunge. And survived.
Wow.
Sure, he had gashed his forehead, broken his jaw, and all of his kneecaps, but he was still kicking. Bobby Leach became the second person to survive the trip, right behind 63-year-old Annie Taylor. After recovering in the hospital for several months, Leach became a celebrity. Over the next several years, he had plans to make a second bound over the falls, but it never came to be. Why? Well, because in 1926, he went and slipped on a dang orange peel, snapping his leg in half, which went and got infected with gangrene, ultimately killing him a few days later.
Brother got killed by an orange peel. That's even worse than a banana peel. They're not even supposed to be slippery. Like Scoob. I'm sorry, that's just what I sound like, apparently. Oh my good lord. So you can survive ooh, that was almost bad. Niagara Falls, but you can't survive an orange peel. Like, brother. Disappointment.
Remember that death always gets the last laugh.
Yeah, that's real.
Having served the shortest presidential term in United States history, you know something must have gone down. Well, it was President William Henry Harrison's health bar. The withering president had a pretty impressive career before assuming office. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1791 at the age of 18 and quickly rose through the ranks, serving in the American Indian Wars, which sought to expand U.S. territory further west against native tribes, which they did. Satisfied with his service, Harrison decided to retire from the military at 25 and toss his hat in the ring for a career in politics. Recognized for his leadership skills on the battlefield, then President Guy John Adams gave Harrison control over the territory of Indiana as governor, with the goal of expanding that territory for statehood eligibility. One consequence of this territorial expansion was the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811, which only further displaced natives from the area in order to allow more settlers to, well, settle. This success cemented Harrison's legacy, as Indiana would eventually become its own state in 1816. But leading military campaigns from afar, that's boring as shit. Harrison missed being in the middle of the action, so he came out from his military retirement to fight in the War of 1812, serving as a major general for the U.S. Army against the smelly redcoats, who weren't too happy seeing the U.S.'s throbbing expansion.
Throbbing what? What's throbbing? That's concerning. I don't know why, but the smelly redcoats made me think of, like, whenever SpongeBob and Patrick were, like, just, like, killing each other with, like, freaking soap and grime and just everything. And I don't know why that just reminded me of that so quickly, but it did. Like, why is that all I could friggin' think of, man? Just SpongeBob everywhere.
A bunch of people died, and the war ended in pretty much a stalemate. But the outcome solidified the US as a world power, being able to at least defend itself from a foreign power. This really boosted national morale and pride, and with no restrictions put in place, the US just kept on manifesting that destiny in the coming years. Now back in a time of peace and having successfully satisfied his war boner, Harrison fell back into politics, serving in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and eventually running for president. His opponent was 8th President Martin Van Buren, whose first term experienced an economic depression with the Panic of 1837. Of course, Van Buren was given the blame for the economic downturn, even though it began over a month before he was even in office. The economy stagnated, unemployment rose, and the people were properly pissed. So it's no surprise that when seeking re-election, it was now Harrison who would be the favorite to win.
Yeah.
Aww. Harrison won in a landslide, 234 electoral votes to Van Buren's 60. But that wouldn't matter in about a month. Elected in 1841 at the age of 68, Harrison was getting on in his years. Either a stubborn old goat or a complete idiot, he had the habit of being extremely underprepared for the weather. For example, he delivered his inaugural speech in the bitter cold and rain for 2 hours straight, with no overcoat or weather-appropriate clothes.
Connected with the subject is the character of the currency. The idea of making it exclusively metallic, however well intended, appears to me to be fraught with...
Oh, this is gonna suck. Harrison continued to endure exposure to the elements over the next few weeks, eventually contracting a deadly case of pneumonia. Despite his doctors jacking him to the tits with drugs and relying on good old-fashioned bloodletting, Harrison died on April 4th, 1841, exactly 1 month after being elected.
Dang.
Looking
that's
for a
so
new home? Just search it how you'd
unfortunate.
say it. Realtor.com changed the way you search for homes. So you just say what you
I don't need
want.
a house, but I appreciate it. France.
When you were a kid, did you ever try jumping off of a sofa using a blanket as a makeshift parachute, but you failed to calculate if the blanket had the proper coefficient of drag necessary to minimize your acceleration due to gravity, leaving you crashing to the floor in a possible concussion? Just me? Well, take that scenario and scale it up to adult size. Except this is your blanket, and this is your couch. Meet Franz Reichelt, the mastermind behind the parachute suit prototype. An Austro-Hungarian tailor and inventor, Franz became hyper-fixated on developing a sort of wearable parachute. He had identified a gap in the market with the rise of humanity's newest invention, the powered aircraft. Seeing reports of pilots forced to launch themselves out of their airborne contraptions if things went south, Franz vowed to come up with a solution to save lives. So he got to work in 1910 with some initial designs, testing the prototypes by strapping them onto makeshift dummies and hucking them off of a 5-story ledge. Surprisingly, the dummies managed to hit the ground at less than fatal speeds. Not bad. But there was a problem. The prototype weighed 150 pounds. And no pilot's gonna lug all that extra weight onto an aircraft, even if it would potentially save their life. But Franz would not give up. After all, you have to fail many times before you succeed. But it
POV when SpongeBob made the inflatable pants.
did help that there was also some monetary encouragement. Turns out that France's Aeronautic Club held a parachute-esque design competition which offered a cash prize to the tune of 10,000 francs. Considering that the average wage of an unskilled French laborer at the time was only a few francs a day, that prize was nothing to sneeze at. Over the next year, Reichelt was unable to replicate his initial success with any of the lighter redesigns. But to his logic, it wasn't a design problem, it was a height problem. Anyone who has even taken a basic physics course knows that this is a bad idea. You fall exponentially faster the longer you're airborne thanks to acceleration due to gravity. But what's a bunch of stupid science shit gonna do to stop an avid inventor from fulfilling his dream and lining his pockets? Nothing. But the pavement will. But Franz, determined to test his designs from a higher height, pleaded with the Parisian prefecture of police to allow him to run an experiment from the Eiffel Tower. Despite numerous rejections, they eventually gave in. On the bitter cold morning of February 4th, 1912, and to the surprise of everyone, Franz arrived on site in his dumpy-looking parachute suit. Now, the police only gave Franz permission to perform this stunt.
At least it's got pockets, right? It's got pockets, that's all that matters to me personally. Yeah, I have a feeling this is gonna go beyond terminal velocity. Just a hunch. You know. Also, I love Chat History. I love their channel, honestly, because I love history, but it's also a lot funnier when there's drawings about. And then, like, some of the deaths that people have is just unfortunate, to say the least, really.
On the grounds that dummies would be used. Not that he would be doing the jumping himself. This guy was so confident in his invention, boasting to news journalists of how successful it was gonna be. But apparently the police didn't feel like stopping him, so after a bunch of preparations, Reichelt made the leap, but his parachute suit failed to properly deploy, so the poor fella plummeted 187 feet to his death, achieving nothing but a Franz-shaped dent in the cement.
I love that Dragon Ball
And
Z
so ends
reference.
another silly video. I'm gonna be making a part 2 to this.
Wow, that. Wow. That's really unfortunate, but what did you expect as well? You know, because I think what he was really thinking of, like, the problem wasn't exactly the weight of the parachute. I mean, yes, it would pose a problem later, but that's easily fixable. But the real problem was that he was using, like, small dummies as, you know, the test dummies, when he should have done, like, someone, or, like, a dummy that weighed, like, 200 pounds to really try to compensate, because, as you can tell, you know, a blanket that's tied to a bunch of sticks ain't gonna save you. And you definitely ain't gonna fly if you're gonna hit the ground real hard. You know, it's not gonna feel great. But, yeah. I don't know what everybody else expected. You know, just kind of watching him like, wow, there he goes. Why is he falling so fast? Splat. Oh, that's why. Yeah. I really hope no kids saw that, but if I'm being real, they all probably did. They probably thought it was gonna be, like, so cool, and then it just wasn't. Like, ugh. Let's see, cannonball to the face? Yeah. You can survive that.
Morning, Pete. Coffee's on and your Uber's on its way.
You know, I've been thinking, maybe I should just go by Peter now?
Peter Davidson.
The Silliest Deaths in History, Part 2. In a world of constant scientific revolution and innovation, it's required that any new theories be put to the test with reliable and repeatable proofs. Otherwise, you're about as useful as a flat earther. But sometimes that proof puts people in harm's way. Take, for instance, one Jesse William Lazier. This handsome block of cheddar was an American physician in the late 1800s, though he did live to see the new century, just not for very long. But we'll get to that in a bit. Growing from a well-to-do boy into a well-to-do man, Lazier had a passion for helping the ill and minimizing all of the icky sickies that had plagued humanity throughout history. So he took that passion and put it to good use, receiving his doctorate in medicine from Columbia University in 1892. Upgrading himself from graduate to practicing physician in 1895, Lazier focused his studies on two major diseases, the infectious malaria and the deadly yellow fever, both of which were stirring up all kinds of problems in the late 1800s, the worst of which being that people were dying. But exactly how these diseases were being spread so easily, particularly in the southern United States and in the Caribbean, remained a mystery, for a few more years at least. Well, that's not exactly true. You see, about 14 years earlier, Cuban public health professional disease researchy guy Carlos Finlay came up with a theory. He proposed that some diseases, particularly yellow fever, could be transmitted through the bite of a single infected mosquito. It's a rather simple theory. An itty-bitty mosquito bites an infected monkey, acquires the yellow fever, flies away, finds a healthy human, gives the suck and leaves behind yellow fever, and the cycle continues. Now, if you've ever spent more than 2 seconds in the American South, you know just how bad them little shits can get. So if there's a few infected people and a lot of mosquitoes, things are going to spread faster than a bad joke at a dad convention. Oh, come on, I'm hungry. He said it. Finlay laid out his research and presented his nido-mosquito theory to the scientific community, opting for control over the mosquito population to minimize the spread. And they all laughed at him. All them stupid science bitches ridiculed and mocked Finlay's theory, brushing it off as complete nonsense. But now we fast forward more than a decade, and a very confident Lazier was willing to put that theory to the test. On himself.
Right here's an infected skater, and here's an uninfected me. So, if it bites me and I get infected, well, there you go.
And so, in September of 1900, Lazier was deliberately bitten by an infected mosquito. He contracted yellow fever and died several days later. But his sacrifice would not be in vain, as it confirmed Finlay's theory, subsequently revolutionizing the control of yellow fever, including controlling the mosquito population. The age of exploration saw a lot of exploring from many a capable sea captain. But amongst the Columbuses and Marco Polos of history, some have fallen through the cracks, their deeds and accomplishments forgotten to time, or just not important enough for people to care. Johnny Kendrick was one such captain. Ever since growing up aboard Papa Kendrick's whaling vessel in his teenage years, John had a love of the sea, which explains the vast success he found in his later years. This guy was more American than a strapped apple pie asking for a tip. A member of the American Sons of Liberty, Kendrick personally took part in the famous Boston Tea Party, hucking countless crates of precious British life fuel into the harbor. He also commanded a privateer ship during the American Revolution, attacking and capturing British warships with his crew of 104 men, even going as far as helping convince the French to join the fight. After helping America get its independence, Kendrick took to the seas once more, this time on a more exploratory venture. Teaming up with famous explorer ship-sailing captain fellow Robert Gray, whom you've probably never heard of, the two bros made history, leading the first U.S. expedition to the Pacific Northwest, where they established a strong fur trade route. This was mainly trading goods like mirrors and knives to purchase sea otter pelts from local natives. Hey, gotta do what you gotta do, you know? Kendrick also made himself at home in Hawaii in the late 1700s. There, he built up a pretty lucrative sandalwood trade hub, harvesting the wood in Hawaii and shipping it off to China, who treasured the luscious lumber for its durability, medicinal and therapeutic properties, and of course, its smell. Oh, that's good wood. So Kendrick spent many a year just jamming as much of his wood as he could into China's supple trading ports, skipping back and forth across the Pacific Pond between mainland China and the Hawaiian Islands. But Hawaii, historically speaking, often had a bunch of fighting between chiefs of the different islands. Each chief, understandably enough, wanted to expand their respective territories and influence. Well, when returning to the islands in 1794, Kendrick found Hawaii to be in complete turmoil, with two chiefs duking it out to be the big chief in charge. One of the tribes was being supplied by Captain William Brown, a proper Brit who was willing to get some land for the British crown. Kendrick replied he too supplied a chief of great renown, and put to the test Kendrick did his best to smack the captain down. So in December of 1794, a battle commenced with Captain Brown supporting the chief of Oahu and Kendrick supporting the chief of Kauai. How cute. The tropical tussle ended with Kendrick's side being victorious, inspiring him to celebrate the only way a true American knows how, by firing off loud guns.
Yeah.
As planned, Kendrick's ship had ignited a volley of cannon fire. Although his side had lost, Captain Brown, determined to uphold proper British etiquette, agreed to discharge a volley of his own cannons in Kendrick's honor. Oh, this turtle soup is to die for.
Oh, and he dead.
Well, that's what you get for slurping your soup. Ugh, turns out in a complete honest mistake.
Never slurp your soup, kids. That requires context. Yeah, don't be disrespectful. Not nice. Might get a cannonball in the face. You never know. And I turned Canadian. And I don't know why. But I did. Don't ask questions.
Captain Brown forgot to unload shot from one of his cannons before firing it off. Some historical accounts claim that grape shot tore through Kendrick's cabin, creating complete chaos and quickly killing the competent captain as he crunched on a collation of consumables. Oh, sorry about that. It's completely my fault.
Never sue the other driver after a car accident. There's a better way to get paid a way bigger check without having to go to court or pay expensive upfront legal fees.
Yep, that Jack Daniel. The two first-name having freak who founded the famous Jack Daniel's Tennessee Whiskey Company. You know, that succulent spirit that did, will, or is getting you through those tough college days or life in general. That's the one. Well, little Jackie Boy was born in Tennessee in the mid-1800s as the youngest of 10, mainly because his birth was the one that sent his beloved mother skyward. Very sad. Now, unfortunately, not much is known about Jack's early life because them town records don't went caught fire. Most of the insight that we do have into Jack's life actually comes from the Jack Daniels Company historical records. Teeny Tiny Jack, the youthful entrepreneur that he was, yearned for work at the ripe old age of 8. The man to answer Jack's call was this guy, Dan Call, a preacher, a screecher,
how tall is your hat, son?
and one distilling creature. And of course, it would be here that Jack would find his calling. Something about Jack caught Dan's eye, and he saw real potential in the little tyke. This boy's gonna make a fine whiskey one day, I tell you what. And so, according to company history, an 8-year-old Jack began learning the art and science of distillation from one Nathan Green, a master distiller and slave under Dan Call.
Oh, there you go.
Fast forward several years, and Dan hit a crossroad. Given an ultimatum by his wife, Dan had to choose between his relationship with his tasty spirits or the Holy Spirit. The Reverend chose his Lord and Savior, saving his soul and his liver in the process. In that choice, Dan had sold his prized distillery to none other than his favorite pupil, Jack Daniel, whose first act as new owner was to hire on his friend and mentor Nathan Green as the company's master distiller. He also employed Nathan's 2 adult sons and, later down the line, his grandsons. Now, the Jack Daniels website really emphasizes that Jack never owned slaves. So if you disagree, don't look at me. I'm just a guy on the internet. A man of all business and no pleasure, Jack never married nor had any children of his own. He did, however, take his nephews under his wing to learn the business, eventually handing the distillery down to them in 1907 once his health bar had reached a solid yellow. But it would be a few years later in 1911 before Jack would kick the bucket, or in this case, something much heavier. According to legend, Jack Daniel, now in his 60s or so, had forgotten the combination to a personal safe housing a bunch of valuables like safes are typically designed to do. In his frustration, Jack tried to solve the problem in true US Southerner fashion, by putting a boot up its ass. But since a safe has buns of literal steel, Jack instead broke his toe, causing a severe blood infection. Jack Daniel reportedly died of blood poisoning on October 9th, 1911. But, is this story true? I don't know. Here's a rather...
I saw that once on 1,000 Ways to Die. I think that is a death on there. I don't know, I haven't watched it in a hot minute.
Recent one for you. Back in 1993, when the world was witnessing the birth of the internet, Czechoslovakia was checking out, and President Clinton was gearing up to suck or be sucked at his job, Gary Hoy was about to meet his untimely death. An extremely successful business partner and corporate and securities law specialist for the Holden Day Wilson law firm in Toronto, Canada, Gary was living it up. But he would quickly learn that it's a long fall from the top. Gary had a reputation as a very personable guy, always loving to talk to people, share wisdom, and loved cracking a few jokes here and there. But on July 9th, 1993, one of Gary's jokes would fall flat. While attending a reception in the office on a Friday, Gary decided to give a tour of the office to a group of accounting and law students, which of course was a typical routine for Gary's charismatic character. But what happens next would be cemented in the minds of everyone around him. While on the tour of the 24th floor office, Gary decided to whip out his signature move. Boasting about the structural integrity of Canadian architecture and the seemingly unbreakable glass office windows, Gary charged full speed towards one of said windows, a party trick he apparently had performed successfully many times in the past. Typical Gary. But this time, he was also successful. Gary bounced right off of the glass without a hitch, to the applause and laughter of the students. Y'all wanna see me do it again?
Yeah!
No, not really. Gary was about to push his luck, and a little too hard on the window. Gary charged once more, hitting the glass at a sprint. Now, to his credit, the glass didn't break, but the entire window frame dislodged from its setting, causing Gary to plunge the full 24 stories to his death. The students and various colleagues stood paralyzed and horror-struck after witnessing Gary's fall, not to mention the witnesses on the ground where Hoy's body had landed. Following the incident, many of the firm's lawyers received professional counseling, but some chose to part ways with the company, eventually leading to its full closure in 1996.
That's interesting.
Talk about having a falling out. Each of us wants to accomplish our own big motivational concrete goals before crossing the eternal finish line. A loving family, traveling the world, subscribing to this channel, which you can do right now. But as the Rolling Stones once said, you can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes... I forget the rest. Anyway, this is Frank Hayes, and he has his own goal, to win a race. A horse race. Problem is, though, he is no professional jockey. A young Irish fella born in Ireland in 1901, Frank grew up as a stable boy and eventually an apprentice horse trainer under James Frayling, a wealthy gent who owned and bred professional racing horses. Paying close attention to Frank's rather small stature, Frayling gave Frank an opportunity to race as a jockey. And he lost. But apparently not too bad, because he was given a second chance in 1923. One small snag in this plan, however, was that Frank was a tad too heavy. Jockeys were required to weigh less than 130 pounds in order to qualify for racing. Ideally, the slimmer and sleeker your jockey is, the less of a burden he is for the horse, allowing for a higher potential speed. Less mass, go fast. And so Frank was given a doozy of a task. Lose 12 pounds in a few days. And that's a big ask for someone already in a healthy weight range, but Frank was determined to strap in the saddle once more. Through what I can only imagine were extremely unhealthy choices, the frail Frank ended up making the cut and was given the thumbs up to participate in the race, though he was nowhere near expected to win, with him and his horse only given 20-1 odds. On June 4th, 1923, Frank mounted his horse named Sweet Kiss and prepared to travel around the track. The racers were off, and Sweet Kiss quickly trailed behind the group. However, in the final stretch, Sweet Kiss apparently kicked in maximum overdrive and managed to close the gap, with Frank appearing locked in, closely hugging the horse's neck. In an extreme upset, Sweet Kiss actually won the race by a pretty respectable lead. But after dropping from a gallop to a canter to a walk, Frank was still closely gripping the steed. Frank Hayes was dead. During the race, Frank's heart gave out, presumably from the extreme and unhealthily fast weight drop sustained to get into the race in the first place. So yeah, Sweet Kiss carried a corpse across the finish line. Frank Hayes photo finished into the great beyond at the age of 22. Or 35, depending on whatever source you read. I know that's a big discrepancy, but welcome to history. Unfortunately, Sweet Kiss, now superstitiously dubbed Sweet Kiss of Death, never ran another race as jockeys refused to mount the mare, fearing a similar fate. So of course, it was the end of her show, and she got her final curtain call. Speaking of which, that's the end of this video. Want me to eventually make a—
What the flip? Good lord. You can't just do that to me, man. Jeez. Gosh. People mistreated animals so badly back in the day. Well, people still do now. But I feel like it's gone down a little bit. Mostly because, like, vet care, I guess, has gotten better. Wow. That was terrible. As well as, like, actual medicine. Because, putting leeches on your body? Cause you got, like, a fever or something? Like, no, thank you, my good sir. I would rather not. I mean, you die either way most of the time back in the day. Fever, you just sit there with it. It evolves. It's like a Pokemon, you know? Goes from Charmander to Charizard. In both temperature range and Pokemon range. But, like, I feel like there was so many hidden, like, really big, medical kind of breakthroughs back in the day. And but the files ended up getting, like, lost or destroyed or something, and we just never found them until we figured it out, like, closer to now. Because, like, you know, like, they might have found out, like, a possible cure for, like, radium sickness, because of all of the, like, deaths from it, like, in, like, 19 something, that I can't remember right now, but we might have lost it, you know, because it's been a minute since we've had to worry about, like, places like American Radium and the Radium Girls and everything. I love history, if you can't tell. Love learning about stuff. Unless it's boring. That's when I don't want to learn about it. But I guess, you know, I'll stop yapping. And I think that'll be enough for me today. So have a good day. Oh, that was scary, a wire fell. Good morning, good evening, and good night from ol' me.